Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Bradbury, I brought up the SMS rule in my opening statement, and I'm assuming you know enough about safety management systems to have this discussion. That safety management system is about a continuous improvement and an analytical approach. So it basically means when you come up with a problem, you're going to stop and fix it. So it's not, you can't keep moving forward. So in this article that was reported in the, can you just put it on the chart thing? We know that the rule was halted 9 days after the Max crash. Why did you stop the rulemaking from happening?
Well, I don't know that I stopped it.
That's what's reported in the paper, and I mentioned the FAA person who was in charge of the process, who said the industry and everybody wanted to move forward, and it was submitted, and then next thing you know, it's pulled. So,
well, certainly we go through a review of every regulation, and as I recall, in that regulation, there were questions on the merits about which entities it should apply to and how it might apply to small businesses or small entities. Those are the kinds of questions that need to be addressed whenever
so you're saying you might have killed the SMS rule because you didn't want it to apply to small manufacturers?
I wouldn't say I killed the SMS rule. And let me say,
we still don't have one. Our committee has worked hard to get one, and now it's going to be in law, but I have more questions about this. But yes, you did stop it from happening. There was a recommendation to move forward on it, and your office stopped it.
Well, Senator Cantwell, let me say I strongly support safety management systems as an approach to regulation.
A mandatory, not
I would
an
support
optional.
mandatory safety management systems, and I would appreciate the opportunity to work with this committee to make sure we have them in place, not just in aviation, but in other transportation sectors, because I think it's a smart way to regulate. You put the onus on the operators and the manufacturers to avoid safety problems, defects. You put it on them. They have to come up with the system to do it, and then you hold them accountable. I think we can.
Did you agree with the FAA's decision to allow the Boeing company to continue to fly Maxes after the first crash?
That was, I know, agonizing period, and I know the experts at FAA were looking very hard at it, looking at what might have been involved in that. And the Secretary's office, I was assisting the Secretary. We were very closely monitoring the FAA, the professionals at the FAA in that. We certainly supported their decision to ground the 737 MAX. In hindsight, a lot could be said for doing it sooner. It was an unprecedented situation for the FAA to ground an entire fleet of aircraft like that, but I think they made the right decision. And then, you know, we were very involved for
the right decision
to ground the plane.
But back to the FAA went to Seattle after the Indonesian crash and basically didn't do any kind of thorough review. Again, a safety management system would have required an analysis. That's what safety management system is, of critical features. But the FAA, filled with light touch people, which we've tried to root out, and that's why we try to pass strong legislation, because we don't want a light touch in aviation. And we can't have an efficiency approach or a bean counter approach, because that's not saving lives. And in reality, it's not saving money either. So we need an FAA and a DOT and a general counsel who is going to stand up to get these rules in place.
I agree. I agree that we need strong safety management systems, as I indicated before, with accountability, with real penalties, and we need to be tougher on Boeing. We need to be tougher on the industry. We need to be tougher on the railroads, as we've seen with the East Palestine disaster.
Okay, I don't have a ton of time left, but so when this committee passed, so we did what the FAA wouldn't do. We mandated a safety management system. That still is now rolling out. But you were still there when we passed that. You could have just popped up the rule and said, let's go. But you didn't. Do you know why?
I don't recall the ins and outs, but do you
see what I'm saying about that? You had this old rule in your back pocket. We passed it. We said, now do this. You were still there. You could have said, well, let's get going. This is clear. Let's get going. But you didn't. Did you have any thoughts about that? Because I have one more issue I wanted to get to quickly.
I never stopped regulatory efforts directed at safety in order to achieve cost savings or meet the president's 2-for-1 requirement on rulemaking. We never stop safety critical rules for that reason.
Okay, here's one that's really bothersome right now, and that is this letter that came out from Eleanor Holmes Norton that now shows this week that ADBS out was routinely turned off by the military. He says in the letter, I have it, I'll enter it in for the record. The question was, due to the sensitive nature of missions supporting the movement of very important personnel in and around the NRC, that the Army Aviation Brigade at Fort Belvedere and Marine Helicopter Squadron will execute 100% of their missions with ADSB off. That was June 8th, 2023. So the military was saying, now the reason this is important is because the Obama administration said, let's have a rule and let's not have these people exempted from the rule. The Trump administration came in and said, no, we're going to write a rule and they are exempted. Oh, but by the way, it's really only in these few instances and these few times. And then we find this letter that basically says it's 100% of the time we're not having that turned on. So you were involved in rulemaking that was different than the prior administration's attempt to try to rein this in. And so, listen, I get it. I don't, I've been in the private sector. Guess what? There is bureaucracy in the private sector. Big is a problem. Okay, big is a problem everywhere. But in this instance, what this country needs right now is people that will adhere to safety first. It is the gold standard. It will help us lead in the next generation. But we can't do it if we continue to have people who fall into this, yes, we're going to allow this exemption, we're going to allow this to happen, we're going to do this in the name of efficiency. So I'm sure we'll have more time, Mr. Chairman, but if you have a response that you know of now to this ADBS issue, great. If not, I'll take it for the record.
Well, I do think the Secretary will want to work with the Secretary of Defense with regard to military aircraft and civilian airspace in the U.S. to ensure that systems that are needed for safety are used as appropriate. And that's an example of something where there needs to be coordination.
Like, just for the record, your thoughts on the former Obama rule and then the rule you proposed exempting them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.